At Thanksgiving, my daughter-in-law stood up and said, "You're out of this family." That was the sentence that cracked my world like glass. The dining room went silent except for the soft hiss of the candles. It was the kind of silence that swallows sound and stretches seconds into whole minutes. The carved turkey sat untouched at the center of the table, its skin glistening under the chandelier. Around it, my son's friends and distant cousins clutched their wine glasses, not sure where to look. I sat at the far end of the table in a cream silk blouse and my mother's pearls, a woman who had paid for the entire spread, the caterers, the imported wine, even the linen napkins Rachel had chosen herself. For weeks, I've been planning this dinner, thinking it was the first time in years our family would be whole. Rachel stood now at the head of the table, one hand resting on Daniel's shoulder, the other gripping her phone like a gavel. She smiled thinly. "On behalf of the family," she said, "we think it's time for you to step back. You've been making things difficult. We want to create new traditions without interference." A cousin gasped. Someone dropped a fork. Across from me, Maya, the only friend I'd invited, caught my eye, her face pale. I blinked once, slowly. "Excuse me?" Rachel raised her chin. "You're not invited to Christmas. You're not welcome at family events. It's time to let go." Daniel kept his eyes down. Phones ongled discreetly around the table. I could see the glow of screens recording. They thought I was going to break, to protest, to weep. I looked at Rachel's manicured fingers, at the gold bracelet on her wrist, the one I'd given her last birthday, and at the wineglass trembling slightly in her other hand. My mind slid back to the last decade, the tuition checks, the down payment on their house, the startup capital, the loans that were gifts in disguise. All of it had bought me a seat at this table. And now, in one sentence, she was pulling the chair out from under me. I forced a small smile. "Thank you for your clarity," I said softly. Rachel blinked, thrown off by my calm. "We didn't want to embarrass you," she said. "But this is healthier for everyone." I glanced at Daniel. "Do you agree with this?" He swallowed hard but didn't answer. I placed my napkin neatly on the tablecloth, stood slowly, and adjusted my coat. The cameras on their phones followed my movements. In that moment, the air changed, not just humiliation but an undercurrent of anticipation. "Enjoy your meal," I said. My voice was steady but inside my pulse was a drumbeat. I turned and walked the length of the dining room. My heels clicked on the hardwood like punctuation. Behind me, whispers rose and fell. Did that just happen? Did she record it? Oh my God. Maya slipped out behind me into the hallway. "Don't react here," she whispered. "Don't give them the show." "I'm not," I murmured. "I'm giving them a memory." In the entryway, the smell of pine garland mixed with roasting turkey. The house I'd bought for Daniel was dressed like a magazine spread, candles, gold-rimmed china, a hired pianist playing soft jazz from the den. I picked up my handbag and slid my phone out. The screen was still lit with the text Rachel had sent earlier. "Don't be late. Family photos at 6. I thumbed through my contacts and pressed a name I hadn't called in years. It rang once, twice. "Evelyn," I said when she answered. "It's time." Maya's eyes widened. "You're actually, yes." I walked out into the crisp November night, the door closing behind me with a soft click. Through the window I could still see Rachel standing at the head of the table, Daniel staring down at his plate, and the guests murmuring over their phones. I raised the phone to my ear. Start with the downtown office, I said quietly. Then the lake house. Lock everything. Evelyn's voice was calm. Understood. I hung up and slipped the phone back into my bag. In the reflection of the glass door I caught my own face, not humiliated, but resolute. Behind me, the holiday lights twinkled. Inside, a family dinner continued with one empty chair and a secret none of them knew yet. When people asked how I'd lost control of my own family, I don't start with Thanksgiving. I start with the years before, the years of giving. After my husband died, the house became unbearably quiet. I filled the silence with checks, plane tickets, and gifts. Daniel was all I had left, and I tried to build a bridge of generosity between us, plank by plank. First, tuition. He called late at night during finals week, saying his loan application had fallen through. I wired the money that night. Just focus on your exams, I told him. I'll handle the rest. Then rent. His first job paid too little, the city was expensive, and Rachel was just moving in. I covered their deposit and bought furniture. Temporary, I told myself. A hand up, not a handout. Then the ring. He'd saved for months but still couldn't afford the one Rachel wanted. I bought it and tucked it into a velvet box, telling myself it was an investment in their happiness. After that, it became a rhythm. Vacation flights. Car repairs. Medical bills. Startup capital for Daniel's app idea. When Rachel said she wanted to leave her job and go back to school for a new certification, I paid for that too. Each time I paid, I told myself it was an act of love. Each time I signed my name, I told myself it was temporary. But piece by piece, those signatures turned into a latticework of obligation that encircled me instead of them. Rachel was polite at first, bright smiles, thank you notes, Sunday dinners where she called me Mom. But little shifts crept in. Let me handle the bills, she said one afternoon, glancing at Daniel's phone. He's so busy. Let me send the thank yous. Let me set up your online banking. Let me consolidate the accounts for convenience. It was easier to say yes than to fight. Easier to believe her when she said, "We're a team now." Then the small manipulations. Invitations to family events that arrived at the last minute. Calls Daniel cancelled because work ran late, but I'd see Rachel on social media at a restaurant across town. Holidays framed as just us without me. Even my own account started to change shape under her hand. All our frauds appeared for services I hadn't ordered. Insurance policies updated with new contact information. When I asked about it, she'd smile and say, "Oh, we're just streamlining things. It's more efficient." Looking back, the emotional vulnerability was obvious. After my husband's sudden death, I clung to Daniel like a lifeline. Money was how I stayed connected. If I kept them safe, I told myself, they would keep me close. Maya warned me. "They're weaving a net," she said once over coffee. "Not out of love. Out of leverage." I waved her off. "They're just stressed. Young people handle things differently." But even then, part of me kept a seed of self-protection alive. Old habits from my younger life, before the widow's quiet years, had taught me to leave one door unlocked for myself. That door was the evergreen clause. It came back to me late at night after the Thanksgiving dinner, lying awake with the phone still in my hand. Years earlier, in a rush of self-preservation, I'd added a line to one of my older trusts, a clause that effectively locked in my controlling interest in several properties unless I personally appeared with ID at a bank to change it. No one could move the funds or transfer ownership without that physical presence. I hadn't thought about it in years. Now, as I stared at the ceiling, the memory clicked into place like a key sliding into a Trustee shall notify seller immediately and freeze said assets until seller appears in person with notarized identification. My heart pounded. Rachel could forge signatures all she wanted, but she couldn't forge my face. I closed the binder slowly, feeling a tremor run through me. That clause was my lifeline, and my weapon. Back in the present, the dining room was empty, but the echo of Thanksgiving lingered. I walked through the silent house, touching the furniture I'd bought for Daniel, the art Rachel had chosen, the walls I'd painted. Each object now felt like a ledger entry. At the kitchen counter, I poured a glass of water and stared at the faint reflection in the window. Somewhere out there, Rachel and Daniel were laughing, thinking they'd cut me off, thinking they'd erased me from the family narrative. They had no idea about the clause. No idea about the deeper layers of my life. I whispered to the glass, "You took my seat at the table. You didn't take my life." After Thanksgiving, I learned a new skill, watching my own erasure in real time. It started small, a cousin tagging me in a blurry photo from the dinner table. Under it, Rachel's caption read, "Toxic people don't belong at healthy tables." Comments poured in with hard emojis and affirmations. My face wasn't even visible in the shot, cropped out like an afterthought. Then an Instagram story appeared on Daniel's account showing their packed suitcases, champagne at the airport lounge, a caption about new beginnings. The camera lingered on Rachel's smile, then on Daniel's hand squeezing hers. In the background, my name was never mentioned. In a private family group chat, one I'd been removed from months ago, Rachel posted a slick infographic about financial boundaries and age in relatives, along with a photo of me handing her an envelope at last Christmas. Out of context, it looked like me begging. In reality, it had been a gift card for her continuing education. Friends began texting me screenshots. "What's going on? Are you okay? Rachel posted this weird thing about you. Daniel seems distant. Is everything all right?" Each ping was a tiny cut. One night, unable to sleep, I sat at my kitchen table in the blue glow of my laptop and began scrolling. The narrative Rachel had been building was clear. I was controlling, I was unstable, I was a financial burden. Every favor I'd given had been rewritten as an intrusion. I opened my email and searched authorization. Up came dozens of digital forms I didn't remember signing. I clicked one at random, a convenience authorization for their home insurance, dated last spring. My signature looped closed again, the same forged style I'd noticed on the family trust. A chill ran down my spine. I went to my file cabinet and began pulling folders. Bank statements, trust deeds, property titles. It was like peeling wallpaper off a hidden wall. Behind each document was another hole, another gap. There were auto drafts for things I'd never purchased, premium payments for policies I didn't own, lines of credit opened on my behalf. When I compared addresses on the accounts, they all routed to a P.O. box I'd never heard of. My name was spelled correctly, but the contact number was Rachel's. At the next family gathering, a birthday party for one of the grandchildren, I stayed on the sidelines and watched. Rachel whispered to two aunts at the dessert table, gesturing toward me, shaking her head with a sad expression. Daniel nodded solemnly, playing along. When I approached, the conversation stopped like a cop wire. One aunt smiled too brightly and asked about my health. Another changed the subject. I smiled back, but inside something hardened. This was no longer just manipulation. It was a campaign. Back home, I spread the documents across my dining table, creating 3 piles: things I'd signed myself, things I'd authorized verbally but not signed, things I had never seen before. The 3rd pile grew quickly. Maya came over, saw the chaos, and said softly, "They've been rewriting your whole story." "I let them," I murmured, "because I thought it meant family." "But it's leverage," she said. "They're building a case against you." I picked up one paper from the 3rd pile, a transfer authorization for one of my smaller rental properties. It bore my name but the wrong middle initial. The signature looped closed. Date: 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. I flipped it over. On the back was a notary's stamp from a county 2 states away. I stared at it until the text blurred. "I never signed this," I said finally. Maya's eyes widened. "Then they forged it." I took a photo of the document with my phone and sent it to Evelyn with one line, "Do you recognize this?" She replied almost immediately, "This is a forged POA. Don't touch anything. Call me first thing in the morning." I set the paper down and looked at the piles again. For years, I'd been building bridges with gifts. They had been building a paper cage. But cages can become evidence. I leaned back in my chair, eyes flicking to the window. Outside, the neighborhood slept under a thin frost. My reflection stared back, not the widow at the end of the table, but the strategist I used to be. The phone buzzed with another notification. Rachel's latest post: "New adventures. Family only. Boundaries equal freedom." I almost laughed. Boundaries work both ways. I picked up the forged authorization and placed it in a new folder labeled Countermoves. The first move had been theirs. The next one would be mine. Everyone at that Thanksgiving table thought they were humiliating a retired widow. What they didn't know was that the woman they were pushing out had once built an empire brick by brick, name by name, clause by clause. The flashback starts in a cramped office 30 years earlier. I'm in my late 30s, wearing a second-hand blazer and cheap pumps, scanning blueprints under fluorescent lights. I had just lost everything to a business partner who forged my name on a refinancing deal. The betrayal left me with a mountain of debt, a foreclosed duplex, and a tableau on my hip. That was the night I promised myself, never again. Never leave your whole fortune in one name. Never trust without a paper trail. And always build escape hatches. By 40, I'd clawed my way back, first one rental house, then a small strip mall, then a stake in an industrial park near the interstate. I created shell companies under maiden names and defunct LLCs, sometimes fronted by friends I trusted. Each property was a bead on a necklace only I could string. While other parents were at soccer games, I was at zoning board meetings. While my friends vacationed, I was in dusty basements reading deeds. By 50, I controlled a real estate portfolio worth 8 figures, and no one outside my inner circle knew. Daniel was still in college then, too young to understand what I was doing. When I remarried briefly, even my second husband never knew the full picture. I used layers of holding companies, lawyers who specialized in asset protection, and banks in states with the strongest trust laws. It looked, from the outside, like a modest life, one house, one pension, a used sedan. In reality, I owned warehouses, apartment complexes, commercial land, and a slice of a tech startup. After my husband's sudden death, I slowed down. Daniel was grown, Rachel had appeared, and I told myself I could let go. I put on the costume of a retired teacher and played the part. But the infrastructure never went away. I paid the lawyers every year to keep it fresh, added new errors when tax codes changed, and maintained personal keys to the vaults. That's why the forged signatures made me smile a little. They were amateur hour compared to what I'd seen in boardrooms. Rachel had been playing a confidence game on a woman who invented her own. On the night I found the forged transfer authorization, I went to the safe and pulled out my deepest binder, embossed leather, edges 1. Inside was the list of all my remaining direct holdings, the few assets still in my personal name. The rest was already hidden in structures they couldn't reach. I ran my finger down the columns of properties, account numbers, and holding entities. Each line was a wall they didn't know existed. But the last 3 properties, the downtown office, the lake cottage, and a small but sentimental condo, was still technically mine. That's why Rachel and Daniel had targeted them first. I stared at the page, my mind already building the next move. The next morning, at 6 a.m., I called Evelyn. She answered on the first ring. "It's time," I said. "I'll activate Evergreen," she replied. Evergreen was more than a trust. It was a maze of cross-pledge entities that, once triggered, moved assets like a chess gambit, first to one holding company, then to another, then finally into an irrevocable foundation registered in a state known for ironclad asset protection. It had sat dormant for a decade, waiting for a breach just like this. Evelyn exhaled. "Once I pull this trigger, you're completely insulated. They won't even be able to subpoena without a judge's order. Are you ready?" I thought about Daniel's face at the Thanksgiving table, about Rachel's phone buzzing with secret texts, about the years of gifts and the hollow gratitude. "Yes," I said. "Do it." "All right," she said. "We'll start at 9 a.m. I hung up and stared at my reflection in the darkened window. Outside, the neighborhood was still asleep. Inside, my life was changing shape again. I thought of the network I'd built quietly over decades, a tax attorney in Chicago who knew every loophole in the trust laws, a forensic accountant in New York who could trace assets across 10 countries, a retired judge who once advised me on irrevocable foundations, Maya, my friend, who'd stood by me through the lean years and never asked for more than honesty. They were my invisible army, and for the first time in years I was calling them back to the field. As the sun came up, I packed a small overnight bag and laid out 3 phones on the counter, one for family, one for business, and one Evelyn had given me for emergencies. I powered up the third, the screen glowing like a signal flare. My fingers hovered over a secure messaging app. One by one I sent 3 words to each of my allies: "Evergreen is lie." Within minutes, replies pinged back, "On it." "Understood." La. Standing at the kitchen window, I thought back to the woman at Thanksgiving, sitting at the end of the table, watching her daughter-in-law rewrite family history. That woman was gone. In her place stood the architect. I opened the binder one more time, reading the line at the bottom in my own handwriting from years ago: "This clause exists for your protection. Use only when threatened." I closed the binder, slid it into the safe, and whispered, "Threat received." While Evergreen locked my assets behind a steel wall, Rachel kept acting as if she still held all the cards. She began moving quickly, her tone shifting from soft to imperious. My phone filled with texts from Daniel. "We're worried about you. Rachel thinks you should see someone. Maybe it's time to think about assisted living." At first I ignored them. Then a letter arrived from a law firm I didn't recognize, politely requesting medical records to support a competency evaluation. The implication was unmistakable. They were preparing to have me declared legally incompetent. That afternoon Evelyn called. "They've filed preliminary paperwork for guardianship," she said. "They're claiming you've been making erratic financial decisions, giving away assets, and need oversight." I almost laughed. They've been siphoning me for years. Now I'm erratic. "It's a tactic," she said. "If they get temporary guardianship, they can move assets while you fight it." 3 days later, Whitaker appeared at my door holding a new folder. "You're going to want to sit down," he said. Inside were photocopies of a power of attorney document granting Rachel control over several of my properties. The signature at the bottom looked like mine, but the middle initial was off, and the notary stamp came from a county I'd never visited. "They've been shopping this around to lenders," Whitaker said. "They even got a bank to tentatively approve a line of credit secured by your lake cottage." I stared at the pages. "They're trying to drain me dry." "Not just drain you," he said. "Force you into a corner. Once the credit line hits, they'll claim you're too impaired to manage and push for a pointed conservative. By the time it's sorted, the money will be gone." I gripped the edge of the table. "And Daniel's in on this?" Whitaker hesitated. "At minimum, he's not stopping it." I spent the rest of that day walking from room to room in my house, touching objects like they might disappear. The piano Daniel had learned on. The photographs of his first bike ride. The painting from my first big real estate deal. Everything now looked like an entry in a spreadsheet Rachel was trying to liquidate. But I wasn't the same woman she'd targeted years ago. Evergreen was live. The records were building. And now I had Whitaker's evidence to put the scheme in full view. That evening, as dusk settled, Maya came over. We spread the new documents across the kitchen table under a single lamp. "They're trying to declare you incompetent," she said softly. "Yes," I replied. "And I've never been more competent in my life." We both laughed at the dark irony, the sound brittle but necessary. Whitaker arrived an hour later with another piece of news. "We pulled Rachel's travel records," he said. "And her bank accounts." He opened his laptop and turned it toward me. There it was, 3 luxury apartment leases under aliases in different cities. Wire transfers to an offshore account flagged by the IRS. A pattern of cash withdrawals timed to coincide with my gifts. He clicked another tab. A photo appeared of Rachel at a high-end hotel with a man who wasn't Daniel, both signing papers. "She's not just skimming," he said. "She's building her own escape hatch." I stared at the image. The man was older, sleek, wearing a gold watch. "Who is he?" "We're still running his background," Whitaker said. "But our guest is a financial advisor, or her real partner. The account numbers line up with his firm." Maya exhaled sharply. "She's been planning to cut and run." Whitaker nodded. "The vacation was just the first leg. She's setting up permanent residence under a new name." I leaned back, my pulse pounding. She thought she'd make me powerless and disappear with everything. Whitaker closed the laptop. "Now you have the proof. We can go to the AG, the bank, the press, or all 3. I looked at the forged power of attorney on the table, at the bank approvals, at the hotel photo. A strange calm filled me. She spent years building a story about me, I said. Now I'm going to show the world the real story about her. The clock on the microwave blinked, 10:42 p.m. My phone buzzed again. Daniel, no doubt. I let it ring. Whitaker began packing his files. We'll coordinate tomorrow, he said. This is enough to trigger a fraud alert at every bank they're using. As he left, Maya turned to me. What's next? I picked up the forged POA, holding it between my fingers like a playing card. Next, I said, we make sure she can't touch a penny. And we do it before she knows what's happening. I walked to my desk, opened the safe, and pulled out the binder labeled Evergreen, Active. Inside was the checklist for my final protective moves. At the bottom of the page was one line, handwritten in greening, only reveal the clause after they've moved, never before. I closed the binder, feeling the steel click under my fingers. Outside, the night wind rattled the windows, but inside I felt solid as a vault. By the time Rachel thought she was closing in, I had already moved 3 steps ahead. The forged power of attorney sat in a clear evidence sleeve on my kitchen table. Whitaker had compiled every bank transfer, every luxury lease, every offshore account. Evelyn had redrafted my holdings into Evergreen. All that remained was the trigger. I poured myself coffee, sat at my desk, and opened a new email draft. Subject line, urgent, forged POA on elderly client. Attachments, 32 PDFs, recipient, the fraud unit at the State Banking Commission. CC, Attorney General's Elder Exploitation Task Force. Before pressing send, I exhaled once, steadying my hands. Then I clicked. A soft whoosh sounded as the email disappeared into the ether. A part of me, the old, trusting part, braced for guilt. But instead I felt something like oxygen rushing back into my lungs. By noon, Evelyn had filed emergency injunctions with 3 banks, revoking every authorization Rachel had managed to sneak through. Whitaker called the title company holding the Lake Cottage paperwork and flagged the signature as forged. Consider every transfer frozen, Evelyn said over speakerphone. No lender wants to touch this now. They're radioactive. I spent the afternoon scanning receipts and adding them to a secure folder. Every wire transfer, every insurance premium, every forged document went in chronological order. The pattern was irrefutable, exploitation disguised as care. Maya sat across from me, scrolling her phone. They're posting about you again, she murmured. Calling you bitter, controlling, unstable. I shrugged. Let them. She raised an eyebrow. You're trending. Indeed, by evening Twitter had erupted. 2 hashtags fought for dominance, versus the first claimed I was jealous of my son's new family. The second claimed I was a victim of elder fraud. Anonymous leaks had started it. Whitaker had misplaced a flash drive containing Rachel's bank transfers at a reporter's desk. Evelyn had provided an anonymized affidavit about forged POAs. Within hours the story was on 3 news blogs and a morning radio show. Rachel's Instagram stories grew more frantic, oscillating between self-help platitudes and subtle threats. One read, "Some people can't stand to lose control." Another, "When you expose a narcissist, they'll claim you're the abuser." I almost laughed. The irony was perfect. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed with calls from journalists, lawyers, and even old colleagues who'd thought I was long retired. A television producer left a voicemail. We're doing a segment on elder exploitation. Would you talk? I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to go public, not yet. My goal was to secure my assets and let the evidence speak for itself. That night, Whitaker called from his car. We've got movement, he said. They're trying to close on a credit line in Colorado tomorrow. We just sent the bank proof of forgery. Should halt it. Evelyn three-wayed in. I also tipped off FinCEN about the offshore wires. That'll freeze the accounts faster than a court order. I stared out the window at the dark street. So by tomorrow morning? By tomorrow morning, Evelyn said, they'll realize the fortress is locked. At 6 a.m. my phone rang. Unknown number. Mrs. Caldwell, a clipped voice asked. Yes. This is Special Investigator Lopez from the Attorney General's office. We received your evidence packet. We've initiated emergency holds on all accounts associated with Rachel and Daniel Mitchell. We're also contacting their airline to alert them. We'll need a statement from you later today. I swallowed hard. You're calling me first? Yes, Lopez said. You're the complainant and your evidence was decisive. A click, then silence. Maya, who'd been pouring coffee, set the pot down. Who was that? The Attorney General, I said softly. It's done. At that exact moment, across the world or maybe already in Denver, Rachel's phone would be buzzing with denied transactions, frozen wires, and investigators' emails. She would look at Daniel and realize the woman she'd dismissed at Thanksgiving had outmaneuvered her entirely. I walked to the safe, opened it, and took out the evergreen binder. A green sticky note marked the final page, confirm freeze, stage confrontation. I smiled faintly. Stage confrontation. That was next. Outside, the November lights spilled over the street. My phone buzzed again with a text from Evelyn, they know. Brace for contact. I set the phone down, breathing slowly. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting to be invited to their table. I was setting the table myself. The invitation looked like a peace offering. Family dinner, let's talk, scrawled in Daniel's handwriting on cream stationery. A private dining room at the upscale Lakeshore Hotel. 8 o'clock sharp. Maya frowned when she saw it. You know this is a trap, she said. I know, I replied, sliding the card into my bag. That's why we're going. Adeline and Ridika met me in the hotel lobby. We'd already arranged for a notary, 2 off-duty security officers, and a journalist who owed me a favor to accidentally be at the bar. If Rachel and Daniel wanted a stage, I was going to give them an audience. We entered the private room. Candlelight flickered against dark wood panels. A long table draped in white linen gleamed with silverware. At the far end, Rachel sat with her phone face down, Daniel beside her looking pale. 2 of their friends flanked them like witnesses. I took my seat opposite, Evelyn at my right, Whitaker at my left. We looked like a board of directors at an annual meeting. Rachel started first, her tone sugary sweet. We're glad you came, Margaret. We wanted to clear the air. I smiled faintly. So do I. Daniel cleared his throat. We think maybe you're confused about some of the paperwork, Whitaker interrupted smoothly. No confusion. He opened a slim briefcase and laid 3 folders on the table, each with colored tabs. Let's go through this chronologically. Rachel's phone buzzed once, then again. She flipped it over, glanced, then quickly slid it back face down. Her knuckles whitened. Evelyn spoke next. Here is the forged power of attorney granting Rachel control over Mrs. Caldwell's properties. Here is the mortgage application for the downtown office building. Here are the offshore wire transfers. All tied to accounts in your name, Rachel. She pushed the folders across the table. Daniel blinked. What is this? Rachel smiled thinly. It's a misunderstanding. Whitaker produced his tablet. We also have video of you signing documents with Mr. Carter at the Denver hotel last month, using a false ID. Your wire transfers coincide exactly with funds leaving Mrs. Caldwell's accounts. Rachel's phone buzzed again. She picked it up, stared at the screen, and this time didn't put it down. Her face drained of color. What is it? Daniel asked. She didn't answer. I leaned forward. It's your accounts, I said softly. They're frozen. Every one of them. The room went very still. Daniel looked from her to me. Mom? I met his eyes. I told you at Thanksgiving I appreciated the clarity. Here's mine, you've been living off my generosity and Rachel's forgeries. That ends tonight. Rachel snapped, You can't do this. Already done, Evelyn said. Rachel stood abruptly, chair scraping. This is harassment. Whitaker stayed seated but blocked her path with a quiet gesture. Sit down, Rachel. Daniel turned to his wife, confusion hardening into anger. Is any of this true? Rachel's eyes darted toward the door. She's manipulating you. She's been hiding money for decades. Yes, I said calmly. I've been hiding my own money from predators like you. Rachel's hands trembled. She opened her handbag, pulled out a small black USB drive, and clutched it like a lifeline. This, she hissed, contains everything. All her secrets. All the proof you need that she's the liar, not me. Evelyn held up her phone, recording. Go ahead, she said. Show us. Rachel backed away from the table, the USB glinting under the chandelier. You don't know who you're dealing with. Maya, standing near the door, whispered, Security. 2 plainclothes officers stepped inside quietly. Rachel darted toward the side exit. Daniel half rose, calling her name. The USB slipped from her hand, clattering onto the carpet. She snatched it up again, eyes wild. Give us the device, one officer said evenly. No, she shouted. This is my insurance policy. Then hand it over voluntarily, the other said. Or we'll seize it as evidence. For a heartbeat nobody moved. You could hear the pianist in the hotel lobby playing a slow jazz standard. Then Rachel lunged toward her handbag, pulling out a sealed manila envelope. You'll regret this, she hissed, waving it. This isn't over. The officers moved in, calm but firm. One took the USB from her hand, the other took the envelope. Both items went into evidence bags with numbered tags. Cameras flashed from the doorway, the journalist catching every second. Rachel's face collapsed into fury. You set me up. No, I said quietly. You set yourself up. I just brought a mirror. Daniel sat down heavily, head in his hands. His phone buzzed again with another fraud alert. I reached into my own bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper, the Evergreen Trust confirmation. I placed it gently in front of him. Everything is protected, I said. You'll need to decide who you want to be on the other side of this. Rachel kicked at her chair as the officers led her toward the door, still shouting about secrets and lies. The envelope under her arm was sealed tight, its contents unknown. Maya whispered, "What do you think's inside?" I kept my eyes on Rachel. "The last part of the story," I murmured. The officers disappeared down the hallway with her. The door swung shut, muffling her voice. In the quiet that followed, Daniel lifted his eyes to mine. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking. "I didn't know." "I know you didn't," I replied. "But now you do." I stood, smoothing my coat. The table looked like an abandoned chessboard, pieces scattered. Outside, through the tall windows, city lights glittered against the lake. Evelyn closed her briefcase. "That's the end game," she said softly. "No," I said, watching the door where Rachel had vanished. "That's the middle. We still don't know what's in that envelope." The envelope Rachel tried to guard like a lifeline turned out to be the detonator she never meant to hand over. Inside were contracts, spreadsheets,